goal here is to not fall off the edge of the deck, okay?
Yes.
Our deck build continues as we transform our waterproofed frame into something beautiful. As usual, we're sharing all the tips and tricks we picked up along the way as first-time deck builders.
This is going above and beyond for sure.
Do we have a visitor?
Oh man.
You almost got your hand whacked.
Let's not waste time, we'll take this slow. We've got miles behind us, but miles to go, so let's just break
Socks and sandals are
this
the after-hour shoe look.
to the simplest truth. You and I as one will always be better than two.
Next to me is a completed deck waterproofing system, and that can only mean one thing, which is we are finally ready for some deck boards. I am so stoked to get some boards on this. We absolutely love the choice we made on them. More on that later. And we are finally going to be able to walk into this French door in the back of the house, not having to go through the garage every time we want to get upstairs from outside. Here's what we'll be using for the project. This is Moisture Shield Meridian line in the color Shoreside. We love the very sort of neutral warm brown tone, and we'll be doing both the deck boards and the fascia in this material. To top it off, we'll be doing a picture frame deck as well, which means the edge board around the whole deck will be a solid edge board to hide any of the cut edges. This makes a cleaner look in my opinion. I love the picture frame style, so that is what we're going to be doing. The Meridian line is Moisture Shield's sort of mid-tier decking option. They have a couple below and a couple above. The price on this is pretty reasonable. It's available at any variety of home centers. I think Lowe's stocks it. I'm not sure about Home Depot, but it's a capped wood composite decking, so it's got a solid extruded core with a thinner wood cap that has the color on it. The grain pattern looks really similar to solid wood. We actually liked the grain pattern on this more than their higher tier Vision line. We thought it looked more realistic. One of Moisture Shield's claims to fame when it comes to their deck boards versus others is they claim to have a better mixing process before the board gets extruded. So all of the wood fibers get totally coated with plastics. They say that this extra mixing step that fully coats the wood fibers allows this material to last a lot longer than their competitors who just, I guess, put the wood fibers in with the plastic, melt it, and extrude it all at the same time, and they don't get that full mix. So consequently, this is rated for marine grade and like underwater applications as well. So hopefully it should last quite a while in our standard deck here in Pennsylvania. They come in solid edge and groove edge up to 20 foot in length. We're using all 16 footers, and these are 5/4 by 6 boards. So it's a true 1 inch thick and about 5 3/8 inch wide. Their fascia boards are about 5/8 thick and 11 1/4 wide to cover a full 2x12. So here's how I'm thinking we start out. We do the picture frame on all the sides except for one. We'll leave this side without the picture frame on. That way we can run all the deck boards long, and then at the end we're gonna shim them up a little bit off the waterproofing membrane so we don't damage that, and run a track saw all the way down the edge. I've never installed a deck like this before, but from what I've read, if you try to make all of the boards the exact precise length cut on the ground, by the time you get them up to the deck and they expand and contract in the sun, they will almost never stay the same length. So the best and most consistent way is to cut them with a track saw when you're all done. I'm not gonna be doing it for this section just because I wanna get these miters nice and perfect with the stair overhang here and overhang on all the other edges really well done. And this is only about 4 foot long board, so I feel like I can actually get them pretty darn close to perfect with just measuring them on the ground. Step one is setting up our miter saw station here under the deck. Elena really wants to be vigilant about capturing all the dust from this capped wood composite because there is plastic in the boards. So we set up a tarp here, but then remembered I actually purchased something on Amazon for this purpose that I saw a while ago. This is a baby beach tent that I don't even know where I saw it. I think it was on a blog article somewhere, but someone set one of these guys up as a very cheap chop saw dust hood. Chop saws are notorious for spitting out all kinds of crazy dust that you cannot capture with a vacuum. Like all the vacuum attachments made by the manufacturer are really kind of garbage. So the idea was to put the chop saw in a baby beach tent, and that helps collect all the dust for almost no money. This was like $30 on Amazon. So we're gonna just see if this works. Future baby eventually use this for a beach trip. I think it'll work.
Here is the final product. We are gonna see if this works. We had to use a hair clip The claw clip I literally just had in my hair to clip this up because we didn't really have any lightweight clamps here, and clothespins would have worked really well, but we don't have any here. So we are improvising and hoping that this will work.
This actually worked better than expected. Probably 70% of all the dust and chips ended up in the baby pool by the end of the project. So this thing was definitely worthwhile and something we'll be doing again. So we're just gonna let it sit up here for now. It's gotta have like an 1.5 inch overhang. It's quite a substantial overhang. Right, so it's gonna be like almost like that, because we're gonna be putting a 5/8 thick fascia board on this, right? So after we put that on, it's only gonna hang the fascia by about 1 inch. To fasten these picture frames, we're using Starborn's Pro Plug deck system. It's a hidden plug system that uses long 305 stainless screws. There's a special tool you use to put these in that sets it to the correct depth, and then their plugs are made from actual moisture shield decking. They're just punched right out of an actual piece of deck board. So the grains match up perfectly. Just push the plug in, hammer it flush, and you cannot see these things from like 3 feet away. It's pretty amazing. We did find it works best with a pre-drill. Just going through the deck board, not the joist. Here's Starborn's special tool. This one is not like any other one that I've used before. This actually has a spring-loaded mechanism in here that makes a pop sound, and it pulls the bit out of the hole real quick when it gets to the perfect depth. We've done a couple practice rounds in just a piece of scrap, and it seems to work really well. They do recommend using a drill, a cordless drill, without an impact mechanism on, to drive these guys in, because otherwise I think it would mess with the tool. So the drill is just nice, smooth, steady way to go, and you are not supposed to do any hesitation or anything. You just go until this pops and then pull it out.
Literally disappears.
There she goes. These deck boards are rated for a max of 1.5 inch overhang from the rim joist. That's what I have it set at now, and we'll still be putting a 5/8 thick fascia board on that covers this and makes it look a lot better. And then there'll be about 1 inch or so of overhang still coming over the fascia board. So that's the general assembly with the picture frame. We're going to actually do a field board next to this that goes the whole width of the deck, and then work our way back on the stair landing. I was trying to figure it out in my head the best way to make sure we get all of our miters nice and tight and get all of our gaps even. And I think it'll be best if we kind of use this as our starting point, our datum, run our 16-foot board across, and then work from both ways out from that center board towards the house and towards the edge of the stair landing. Hopefully by the end of the day we can at least get through the stair landing, and then tomorrow we'll probably be just cranking on the full length boards. They actually tell you right in the install instructions for these deck boards that they are not perfectly square already from the factory at the ends. So you have to do a small square cut on every board before you install it. Otherwise, you're gonna have to end up trying to cut it square while it's up there. And that is what we're gonna do for the one end, but the end that we're gonna be butting up to our one picture frame board, I'm gonna square cut those down here on the bench. Take it that way a little bit more. So these are our makeshift deck spacers. These are composite shims, 1/16 of an inch each, and we have stacks of 3 made. So they are doing a pretty good job as far as I can tell. We're gonna basically clamp this board to this board. We do have a few screws in this outside one holding it on, and this will allow us to get a nice even reveal all the way across. Put some pressure on them, throw a spacer in roughly at each joist, and boom. Then it's just rinse and repeat across the whole deck. The key here though is we need to make sure our space against our other picture frame board that we just clamped in there temporarily is also 3/16 of an inch, so I'll take one of these down there. We're just about an inch or so long on the end here, so we hardly won't have any scraps from these offcuts, which is awesome. When I was designing this deck, as soon as we made the decision to do the picture frame border, I purposely made the deck a little bit wider than 16 foot. It's like 16'7" from outside to outside of framing, and that is so that a 16-foot deck board would span as long as I possibly could without having to cut off like 7 or 8 inches on the end of it. So the picture frame comes in about 4 inches on each side. So the width between those picture frame boards can actually get stretched a little bit further. If I were to leave the outside framing width right at 16 foot, I'd be cutting about 8 inches off of each one of these boards. And looking over here now, I'll be cutting about 1 inch or 1.5 inches off. So that will make the boards go a little bit further and we get a slightly wider deck.
For the groove boards, I'm using this system from Starborn. It's called their clip and rip system. It's a pretty tough plastic T-shaped clip and then a 305 stainless screw with a black painted head that goes in. So far it seems to be working pretty well. You can't see the clips really at all in direct sunlight. I found you do have to be pretty careful with these though, because the screw is super close to the edge of the deck board when you're driving them in, so you don't want to nick the edge or the corner of that capped composite because the screw will kind of tear it up a little bit and you'll be able to see that at the surface. So you got to be real careful driving it there, and you really got to make sure that this T is pressed in really well into that groove. You don't want any gaps there because this is your deck board spacer. These are exactly 3/16 of an inch apart and they're going to hold your board there when you clamp it all together. There's a number of different systems for these hidden deck board fasteners. This is one of them. I think it's pretty nice. I like that it's zero corrosion, but it definitely takes some care and some effort to get it right. All right, we're a couple boards in here, just getting the hang of things. I have this picture frame board just tacked in here with a screw at the corner and a clamp on the other side. I started by cutting these like a 1/2 inch longer than they needed to be. I'm butting them up against this board with some shims in place, sort of mocking them up where they need to be. Then I took that straight over there and drew a line all the way across perpendicular to the boards. I started by clamping that picture frame board in place and then realized there was a major crown to it, so they were not looking straight at all. With the actual ends of the boards cut nice and straight, I'll then fasten that in place where it needs to be and make sure that it's gapped appropriately and basically pull the crown out of that and make that straight. This is definitely a little bit tedious cutting each board like individually like this, but this is luckily the only spot I'm gonna have to really do this on. The rest of the field boards, the long boards, I'll be able to cut in place once we have them most of the way fastened in. I considered doing that for this as well. I was kind of in between, flip-flopping. Then I decided I'm just gonna go ahead and scribe it because I like cutting on my miter saw a whole lot better than with my circular saw. And I also want to minimize the cutting over this waterproof membrane too, because I'm gonna have to shim each board up, and it's also a bit of a process to do that. So at the end of the day, I figured it was just easier to mark and take them back down and cut. And just like that, we have some deck starting to take shape here. Next step is to continue our picture frame borders. If you watch the deck framing video, there's a portion in there where I'm talking about what length to cut these joists off at. And I spent probably an hour up on the deck frame figuring this spacing of these 8 boards out to know that at the end of the day, when I put this last picture frame board on, I'm gonna have the appropriate 1.5 inch overhang, and it seemed to work out just perfectly. I have about 1.5 inches. That just goes to show that thinking ahead 10 steps will really save you. If this was like 2 inches or 3 inches longer, I would have a major problem because I'd have to put a little sliver of deck board in or something, or if it was too short, I would have to rip the picture frame width down a little bit and it would just not look very good at all. So just that little bit of time spent up front before we cut the ends of these joists to length made this deck look a lot better in the long run. So if you're doing a picture frame deck, please remember to think about where you're cutting off the ends of the joist. Cut back to the nearest board edge and accommodate your overhang. So I spaced out a piece of scrap right here just to see where this picture frame would land us and made a little mark. I'm gonna cut this 45, then cut a matching 45 on a full length board. I'll make that board as long as the outside corners here, and then I'll likely need to guess and check just a little bit to fine tune those angles, a 1/2 degree or so at a time until these miters are both nice and tight. Another thing to note on this is I didn't use the clip and rip system on this edge of this last field board here. I used
hidden fasteners driven through the face. We're putting a solid board right here, and so we can't accommodate a grooved edge clip on the edge of that solid board. After some guessing and checking, we have a couple miters that are pretty darn tight when everything is held together. So that was kind of tough because we had to keep all three of these miters tight at the same time. And so they're not exactly 45 degrees, they're probably 45.5. But overall, I'm pretty darn happy with it. So we're gonna clamp these together and fasten them down. I think we're gonna attempt to try to put some pocket screws on the undersides of these to just try to keep these miters tight over time. It's one of those things, I'm not sure if it's gonna be a huge deal breaker to pocket screw or not, but we have the chance right now and we might as well do it so that we don't regret not doing it later. I made some errors where I think some holes should go, and you just line it up. Key is you can't let the top of the drill bit go into the edge of the board.
Do you trust me?
Sure. Just
Go?
okay, go ahead and start it. It's good. It's good.
Look at that alignment with that arrow.
Perfect.
Perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Okay. Okay, what do you need me to do?
Just,
Hold on,
I think I got it
like this.
relatively realigned, yeah. I think I'm just gonna have to keep going and pull it. Let the screw pull it in. Can you loosen that clamp? Okay, now you can come help try to keep those aligned. We're gonna try to pick up here and push down on here. It's probably as tight as it's gonna get. In the future, I can put a screw at the very edge here, this way. You know, a color match screw or something. All right, so the outsides of the picture frames are all fastened. I'm moving on to this one now, which has a pretty good size bow to it, or I guess a technical term would be a crown, but the board kind of bananas out that way. So I've got my long straight edge here to sort of make sure that's straight when I go ahead and fasten this. It's only fastened at this left end right now. And then I'll just fasten this way, making sure it's straight as it goes, and then pull that over with a clamp, that end over, so that it is all straight. That'll give us the left edge of where we're gonna continue up with our deck boards till we get to the end of this board. We'll finish our picture frame out and then run the main deck boards all the way to the wall. Couple lessons learned with the hidden fasteners. First, use the drill bit that they recommend. I was able to find this 1/8 inch drill bit. They recommended a 3/16. I didn't dig deep enough in my drawer to find this at first. I was like, 1/8 will be fine for the pilot hole. But when you go ahead and drive the plugs in, there's enough material in there that it sort of leaves a little lump, little raised section. Really almost impossible to see on camera, but when there's direct sunlight, you can just see these little lumps where the fasteners are. And once I found the right size drill bit, that lump is no longer there. So make sure if you're using these, get the right size drill bit from the start and learn from our mistake there. But luckily we only did a handful of them with the 1/8 inch, and the majority around the picture frame will be using the right size bit. Another lesson learned here is those pocket screws really do something, because when it cooled off, this gap opened up to about 1/16 of an inch. This was tight when these were all fastened together, and it still looks okay. Luckily, we will have a rail base right over top and then another rail base like right here for going down the stairs. So it will be pretty well disguised. I think I'm probably just gonna run a bead of like brown big stretch in there, or maybe mix up some exact color if I can get some paint sample that matches this well, just to distract from that gap. But overall, I think once the whole deck is together, you're really not gonna see it. From a few feet away, you really can't see it anyway, but you know, it's just sort of a carpenter pride thing to get nice tight miters. This one still looks exactly like it was when it went together. This actually isn't a gap, this is just a little bit of lippage between the two. The underlying deck surface wasn't perfect. When we drove the hidden fasteners in, they sort of tweaked relative to one another, but just a couple lessons learned that hopefully you can apply on your deck. We've got a trainee on the hidden fasteners.
I got a what?
So we're doing just these little bits here until we get to where we stopped earlier. Then we'll get a little bit more careful, make sure that this is nice and square, make sure our overhang off the edge of the deck isn't too crazy, and use the straight edge to make sure that the board is going to be straight all the way down to the end. Pulled that in about 1/4 or 3/8 of an inch, and I think this is about square enough for government work between the framing square and the stabilo level going all the way down to the end. And in other news, how about that? That's a nice level deck right there, level run. So we're moving along pretty good. We got the first 7 or 8 boards down now, so we're about at the halfway point. And I'm at the point now where my original picture frame border is run out. So I gotta continue on to the rest of the wall before we pick up with the field boards. I just measured the length of that, and we need to notch out a little bit to get around some siding over there, as well as route some thickness off the bottom to accommodate for our flashing, so we're not sitting up on top of our flashing creating a hump. But overall, it's been going really well. The clip and rip system, I at first was a little bit hesitant with it, but now I'm getting used to it and it's working a lot better. We're getting used to how to best get the boards in. Even though they're composite boards, they are pretty flexible and bendy, and sometimes they're not perfectly straight. So you just have to, start at one side and work your way down, putting clips in as you go, hammering as you need to, clamping as you need to. And by the end of it, you have an evenly gapped board. So it's working out all right. We've been squaring the first edge off at the chop saw, and that has definitely left a much nicer and cleaner edge than what came from the factory. They tell you right in the instructions to square the first edge, so that is definitely something you want to do. And then we're using our 3/16 spacers to get a fairly consistent reveal with our edge board. Over at the other edge, we're obviously just letting these things fly whatever length they are. Some we cut a little bit shorter because there were some defects on the other end we wanted to cut off. The cut we'll be making on these is going to be approximately right here where this picture frame angle comes to. And the one thing I was worried about over here is how do I cut this without cutting through the waterproofing membrane? We mocked the technique up on the first board just to make sure we didn't get through all of them and then get caught in a bad situation. But it's really simple. We're just putting the second to last clip in, and then instead of putting a clip here like we did on the other side, we're just letting this loose for now so that we can actually lift these boards up. And like I said, since they're composite, they're pretty flexible. Then I'm gonna wedge a shim in the end of every single one of them. So when we run the track saw along the edge, we'll be really careful about setting that blade depth and make sure that we are at or above the shim and we're not cutting our waterproofing membrane. Then once all the ends are nice and cut flush, we've got our picture frame border on. We'll use the same hidden fasteners that we're using for the picture frame in the ends of this board, just 2 right in each end. Nice benefit of the waterproof bladder is when you drop something, it doesn't fall to the ground like it would on a normal deck. The last part of the board always seems to need some clamping power to get it just right. So this is our hodgepodge of 3 clamps together clamping to the edge of the deck. I had seen some other clamps that used like a little cleat. This is a piece of steel that I rounded the edges off of, and I was using that for a time, putting it in between the boards and giving myself something to clamp off. But what I realized was the leverage on this thing was spreading the 2 boards it was between. So just eventually decided it wasn't worth trying to use the steel cleat, and our deck is small enough that we can just stack some plants up. It doesn't have to give a whole lot of force, just enough to close the gap another 1/8 inch or so. And once we get closer to the house, we'll start pushing off the house with the clamps in spreader mode rather than trying to pull off the edge of the deck. But this does work if you're in a pinch and need to close the gap on the deck board a little bit. One thing I am noticing with these hidden clips is that if they don't bite just correctly in the joist, they end up angling downwards. This is a little bit low, so it makes it much harder to get the next board in this groove because you have to kind of like angle it in and then wedge it up in there. I'm wondering if it has something to do with the fact that we have this waterproofing membrane and we have 2 layers of rubber underneath. The clips have this little angled feature at the bottom. It's like a thin piece of H-shaped plastic, and the longer side of it is away from the board it's clamping. So I think it gives it support, and the idea is it tries to keep the clip level as you sink it in. It kind of bites into the joist, but in my case, since we have somewhat of a soft upper layer of that joist, I'm wondering if it's not quite doing what it's supposed to, like exactly as it's designed. It still does seem to work on probably about 70% of them, but on the other 30% or so, they're ending up at a little bit of an angle. Got our 3/16 shim here. Make sure our end gap is nice and even along the way. Little taparoo gets her seated in the clip.
Here we go.
And we're off to the races. Now we clip it and we rip it. Rip. And of course I'm staying on my joist tape because in theory this joist tape is what's sealing the hole from this fastener and these little H pattern things that are sticking down. I would have liked if they didn't have these little extra pieces of plastic because it's probably causing unnecessary holes in the joist tape, but it is what it is. I really like the fact that these were 305 stainless screws, the heads were nicely painted black, and the composite spacers are not going to corrode or anything.
You're hitting this one. That's gonna be really hard. Oh man.
Jeez, you almost got your hand whacked. You moved your hand in between hammer swings. We made some pretty good progress yesterday, got the majority of the deck boards down except for the last couple next to the house because now it is time to make the most nerve-wracking cut of the whole deck, which is the end cut of all of the boards that are overhanging there so we can finish out our picture frame border. I used this scrap cutoff to mock up at the corner for where this line's got to be, used my 3/16 shim to give myself a gap for my actual cut line, and then I measured relative to the edge of the deck and did the same thing down there. Now I'm just gonna snap a line and I'm gonna use my Kreg Accu-Cut to make the actual cut. So it's kind of like a track saw conversion for your regular circular saw. Some of these boards were kind of crowned at the end, so I put shims in every now and then to make sure that everything was roughly evenly spaced. So when I made the cut and then straightened everything out, there wasn't any weird angles at the end cuts there relative to the picture frame border. And just when Elena thinks my scraps don't come in handy, I saved this little cut-off ripping for a purpose just like this. It's a very long shim, really. I'm gonna try to shove it under all of these boards at the same time so that they're all kind of up at an angle at the end, and I can run my circular saw along them without hitting my waterproofing membrane. That is the main goal here. I did grab some shorter ones too, kept them for the same reason. These boards are pretty bendy at the end, so they should pull up pretty easily to get this underneath. The further that I shove the shim under, the more they're gonna stand up and the less of a chance I'm gonna have hitting my membrane. Of course, I'm gonna be really, really careful about setting the depth of this saw. It's gonna have to be just kind of one or two at a time. This long one might be cumbersome. I think I'm gonna do a few shorter sections. Here's how I'm setting the saw up. It's a fresh 40 tooth blade on it, specifically for cross cutting. And then here is the Kreg Accu-Cut XL. So it's 2 track extensions, 8 foot long total. So I'll only have to move it once. This wood scrap represents my wood frame. I have some actual decking right here, and then between it is a 3/16 shim. And so I have this set to go just through the decking and just into that shim, but not much further. I do not want to risk cutting this waterproof barrier. I can always go back with the multi-tool and clean up any cuts that might not go all the way through on the first pass. Chalk box is so full of chalk, it's leaking out while I pull it. Snapping chalk lines by yourself is kind of a pain in the butt when you're trying to be real precise. Oh, it came loose. I'm trying to hook on the edge of a curved radius. Damn it, I'm gonna need to put a screw in. Take 4 of the solo chalk line snap. Elena's on an errand right now, so I put this screw in here just in my shim. Just goes to show you how much harder it is to do simple things like this with just one person. It's a pretty good line though. I think I should be able to line the track saw up to that and follow it all the way down. All right, here goes nothing. I'm gonna do just a couple and take the scraps out just to make sure that I'm not going through my shim. I think I'm gonna be good. The shim is pretty thick and I've got it under there a good ways, pretty much right where my cut is. So only thing now is just to cross my fingers and start cutting. Can't get all the way up against the wall either, which is kind of a pain, but I have to do a bit of a plunge cut. A proper track saw would be nice because they allow plunge cutting, but working with what I got here. All right, there's number 1, and we didn't go all the way through. So I'm gonna try to put a little bit more pressure on and sit it a little bit deeper. I was probably a little bit hesitant. Second piece isn't loose either. Okay, now it's, second piece is almost loose. I'm gonna take the depth down just an absolute hair, just so I'm not coming back with a multi-tool later, redoing this. Okay, second piece, officially loose. I'm cutting into my shim just a little bit, but I think I can keep a good eye on it as I go. Let's just keep rolling down the line, see what happens. Oh my gosh, I'm making an absolute mess over here. I've got shavings all over my dryer vent now. Goodness gracious. So far, so good. Staying up above the waterproofing. I gotta do a mid-cut cleanup. This is getting ridiculously messy. All right, picking back up with it. So I just gotta clean up the rest with the multi-tool. We're good to go. What a beauty. Turned out better than I thought. The 40-tooth blade did a nice job at keeping the cuts super clean too, just as good as the miter saw. So now we're ready for our final picture frame board. I did just clean out a little bit this first baffle because quite a bit of shavings got in there. So I took the blower and sort of blew out what I could from the top, and then took my hose and went in between the boards. And I gotta say, looking at it from the end, because I can see this now, if I stick my head down here, it cleans out really well with just squirting water in between the boards. I have no doubts this is going to perform just fine without any clogs or debris buildup in the long term. There were a lot of doubters on social media when we posted a reels about this waterproofing system. It's gonna rot the deck boards out because there's gonna be inevitably moisture that traps beneath the rubber. There's gonna be so much buildup if we're around trees, which we do live in the middle of the woods, so we're gonna put that to the test. So I figure I'm going to just leave this as is for a couple years and just see what happens with the debris buildup underneath, see if it does naturally clean out via rain. The stuff up underneath this 2-foot overhang isn't gonna get a ton of rain, so maybe stuff will build up towards the house that we can't see, but I'm gonna keep the ceiling open for a couple years to at least evaluate things. I have access to get inside the baffles. If I need to, I can rake things out if debris does build up. And a few years down the line, I will definitely do an update video to see how this worked out. I know Dr. Dex out in Washington has been doing these waterproofing bladder systems for like a few decades now, 25 something years, and he has not had any callbacks about them. I mean, knock on wood, knock on James Hardy.
that is the same experience out here, but we get a lot less rain and a lot more sunshine than Washington does. So I think that helps our case a little bit as well, but we'll see. So I've got the border board ready to install, routed out the back side of it to accommodate the flashing, same as I did with the other side. But I'm gonna go ahead and fasten all these in first. Made myself a little 2-inch wide jig with a couple marks 1.25 inches in from either side, and that's gonna be where each of my screw holes go at the end of each board. I don't like to just eyeball screw holes. I like when they're all in one perfectly straight line. So making a jig is an easy way to do that. I could also, snap the chalk line and measure it in from each side or something, but I find this is pretty easy as well. So I'm gonna go mark all these, drill them all, and then drive screws in all of them after I make sure that they're all shimmed 3/16 apart and spaced evenly, because they do have a little bit of curvature here and there at the ends of these boards. Probably should have done this before taking the shims out, but it is what it is. I'm gonna hold each board up a little bit with a shim that I place in there just before I drill, just to make sure that I don't drill into my joist tape. It's really meant to seal right around the screw. It's not supposed to have a hole in it before that, so I'm gonna let the screw put the hole in the joist tape.
Finally time to get this guy in here. Pre-drilled all the holes, but it's a banana shape, unfortunately. So it veers out at the end. This is the strategy we're using to solve that. A whole line of clamps out to that door frame to pull this side inwards. And that way we can kind of use this middle shim as like a leverage point. When we go ahead and actually pull this back, we can get a nice tight miter and it will all fit. The reason we are doing it that way is because at the end here, this cannot swing out because of this notch with the siding. It comes tight against the siding and we do not want to damage that siding. So we need to hold that back from hitting the siding, but still be able to get the miter lined up. So it's a little bit of a tricky situation, but you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. Credit to the 4 clamp in a row idea comes from Elena. That was her solution to this problem, and so far it seems to be working. We'll see.
The screws will pull it really tight, right?
It will, it should.
Okay. Oh, that's not gonna hold. It's too much force.
Okay.
Like, see?
And just hold it then a little bit.
Okay.
The clamp is mostly to keep them kind of like in plane. Not to hold them tight, but to hold them from...
Okay. I'll focus on the...
These guys are working really nicely. 2 3/4 inch long, 305 stainless, driven perfectly every time with the special bit that comes with it. Finally ready for the last 2 boards. We've got the first one cut right here. It's ready to go, full width board. The last one though is less than a full width board. It's like a 4 1/4 inch at the most. And it's not all exactly the same because I took my spacer block here, just put it in on every joist and measured to the flashing. And it's not much, but it does bow out a little bit by 3/8 of an inch in the middle. So 4 1/4 is the absolute widest it needs to be at each end. And in the middle, it's like about 4 inches, just under 4 inches. So I think we're gonna rip a board down to 4 1/4 inches and then make sort of a little curved line in the middle here and shave just a little bit more off at the middle. I'm keeping a 3/8 of an inch gap or so next to the flashing so that water can still run down. And then I think I'm gonna also do some perpendicular grooves on the bottom with the router, similar to what I did for our window trims actually, in order to let any water that drips down the siding, any wind-driven rain that hits this flashing, it doesn't get trapped between the flashing and the deck board that's sitting against it. It has channels to get down under. Another consideration I had was doing what I did at the end boards and routing out about 1/4 inch all along where it will sit on this flashing so that it sits flat. But I think I'm gonna try just letting it sit on the flashing at a slight angle. The flashing is gonna have it sitting up a little bit on the high side here, And that way, if water does hit it, it will just be directed off the edge of the deck board away from the house and into the waterproofing system. So I think I'm gonna give that a try first. I can always route the long bit out after we test it out and see that it's, you know, not sitting quite right or it doesn't look good. But the key is not trapping water against the house or against this flashing. We need to allow it to be able to flow out into the waterproofing system. Yep, we hold this on the marks. This is going to be the slight curve we're taking out of the middle of it. That went pretty well. Elena would like to highlight the efforts taken in capturing all of the microplastics, to the best of our abilities anyway. Looking pretty successful. Microplastics police in force. So we got good news and bad news. Good news is that it fits great. It's definitely quite bowed, so I put this little spacer in the middle to push it flat against the wall, and then put 3/8 worth of spacers at the either end so that our gap is where we want it. It works perfectly in the middle there with our 3/16. However, it does sit up quite a bit on this flashing to the point where it is not going to work with our railing bases, which are going to be right about here. It rocks. And so that's not going to work. I'm going to have to route all the back edge off this on the bottom where it sits against the flashing. And then in addition, I'm going to put some vertical slots this way. So any drainage that needs to happen underneath the board can happen, and we're not rocking on top of the flashing. So it is what it is, a little bit more work on this guy, but we know what we got to do, and then it should fit great. Decided while we had the table saw out, it'd be a little bit less messy to do that groove with a dado stack than a router. So threw this thing on almost as wide as it will go. It's about 3/4 inch wide. We'll have to run this through a few times to get it right. All right, dado commence. Yeah, that seemed to work all right. There's definitely some lumps that we might have to clean up with the router, but so right now we're doing about 3/16. That's probably enough. We'll give it a shot. Yep. Well, it's a good thing I didn't route the entire thing. Oh my gosh. Now I truly am microplastics man in the socks and sandals. Holy smokes. That's a lot of grooves, but we won't have any water issues, that's for sure. Socks and sandals are the after-hour shoe look. Once it's past 5 p.m. or so, boots come off, socks and sandals it is.
Woo! Stretch those toesies.
Okay, let's move her in. This last board took an incredible amount of preparation, and as you can see, I put 3 of these little channels in each joist bay so that we should never have any water trapped on top of that flashing behind this first board. Should always have a way to drip down into the joist bay. We've also pre-drilled it on top of each joist, so we should be able just to push this back in. We'll clamp it where it needs to go, get this guy in here, get it engaged in the clip that's already here, and drill that down. This can finally get fastened. And we're not going to do any fasteners through the flashing, of course. We don't want to penetrate that. So this last board will just get 1 fastener on each joist, just like basically right in front of where the flashing's at. You know, I guess we'll have to take this out. I'm just going to have to push it. Whether it's sitting down now, but now I can check it.
Bottled up inside, and all I wanna know is, are you ready for the ride? What have I been waiting for? Oh, I can run, but I can't hide the feelings that
Well, these things were tedious, but we finally got them done, and that is the conclusion of deck boards on the top surface of the deck. We still have to do the ones on the stairs, but it feels really good to have the actual walking platform of the deck done. The picture frame turned out really, really nicely. There is one last step that we're gonna cover in this video, which is the fascia around the top side of the deck. So it's a 11¼ inch deep by 12-inch long board. They're 5/8 thick, and that will go not only around the perimeter of the top deck platform, but also along the edges of the stairs too, the stair stringers and risers. The fascia should not be terribly difficult to put up. We're gonna be using Starborn's Pro Plug Fascia system, which is meant for a board a little bit thinner, and it allows some expansion and contraction, but it plugs the fastener holes with the same style conical shaped plug as there is in the deck boards.
I just did a little test fastener on some scrap to see how it works, and it's very similar to the deck, except this actually has a pre-drilling operation with this special tool that puts a counterbore in it at a very specific depth. Then you use the same tool as the deck, except with a different bit. This bit is purple and the deck one is black. You use that to drive in the fastener, which is a 305 stainless wide head screw. I think it's about 1 7/8 inches long or something like that. The end result is this, and the one thing to notice is you can actually slide this a little bit on the screw. So it allows some leeway for this fascia to expand and contract because it is such a wide board, 11 inches wide, and it's only 5/8 thick. So it will definitely be subject to some expansion and contraction, and these screws let it do that. At the corners, I'm gonna be mitering it just for a little bit more of a finished look. And for fastener spacing, I'm gonna do 3 fasteners evenly spaced every 16 inches. I think the directions are 12 to 16. I think 16 should be fine. Do we have a visitor? Do we have a visitor that wants to help out?
I'm trying to see what you're doing.
You made a hole for yourself in the tarp, didn't you? What's going on over here, he says? The goal here is to not fall off the edge of the deck, okay?
Yes. Safety over everything.
If the board starts to fall, just let it fall.
And then
Not
it hits the
gonna hurt
propane tank and then it blows up.
Propane tank is going to be just fine. Okay. Luckily it's not.
Hold on, I gotta lift. We're like,
Slide it off.
we're sliding it.
Slide it and tip it.
Oh God.
Just be careful. Shouldn't be too crazy heavy. Once we get it supported with clamps, we're good. All right, that's about where it needs to be.
Okay, I got one clamp in.
Should hold itself roughly.
I'm gonna hold it while you get the last one in.
And I'll put another one on down there that is clamping it to the joist.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Good. Easy.
DeWalt clamps for the win,
Easy as that.
as always.
All right, the first run of fascia is coming to an end now, and I've done a lot of these Pro Plug holes now, and I can give a little bit more of an honest review on them. They do a pretty nice job, especially when you're looking from a distance, but they definitely could use some design improvement on the process. The counterbore part of this bit is extremely dull, and it is totally flat. There's no taper at all, so you are there for an hour trying to drill this counterbore and putting a ton of pressure trying to get that to drill. So much so that after like the 4th one, I started pre-drilling with a 3/8 paddle bit in my impact so that I did not have to drill the whole thing out with this Starborn fascia bit. It's just extremely dull, and it fills up with chips in an instant, which makes it even harder to drill. So this has been a lifesaver, doing sort of a pre-drill most of the way and then using the Starborn bit as more of a reamer than a drill bit. That seems to work, but it still requires way more effort than necessary. And then when you're done, it still leaves a lip of basically tear out that you have to deal with. So I didn't deal with it on the first one, and it looks like crap when you put the plug in because all that's sort of like mushing around the plug and it creates shadow lines and you can really see the plug. The solution I found is to use an actual plumbing deburring handle to go around that and just try to shave that little bit of debris off the edge of it and make it a nice clean round plug. The deck screws don't have this problem. The screw totally leaves a nice clean hole and the plug fits really snugly, but I found there's no other way to do it except the deburring handle on these guys. The fascia definitely makes a big difference on the look of the deck, not looking at that exterior rim joist, especially with our folded down piece of waterproofing membrane there. It looks kind of ugly. So having that nice 1x12 fascia covers the rim joist and more, and gives it so much more of a polished look. Very glad we decided to do this.
It's hard to tell here, but this riser face is not perfectly square to this guy. It kind of leans like this. So this is not a perfectly square line. So I'm gonna have to pull a little bit of carpentry magic to make this corner look good. So I'll start by, I think, beveling this entire face. Then I'm thinking maybe I can just leave that actually. And then when it comes time for the stair fascia, I will mock that up and cut away what I don't need. I think that should work. And by the magic of film, it's done. That should line up pretty well with a riser face coming in like this with the matching bevel on it. All right, we're moving right along here. Got this front piece up. This miter is really bad. It will close. I don't have this side fastened yet, and I'm gonna put fasteners at the very corner too, but it was just a real bear getting that thing mocked up. The framing behind this riser wasn't quite perpendicular, and I think the board was also a little bit cupped. So I ended up having to chisel a little bit of the top corner of that board out to try to give this some room to sit back flush again. And I think if I squeeze it, I can get it pretty decent. But that's gonna be a constant struggle, I think, doing the mitered risers, because we're gonna do that all the way down the steps, and that's gonna be interesting. I've got this full length board clamped up here just so I can get that marked perfectly at the very edge. And also, I'm glad I did it, because this board is sitting on top of some of that rubber pond liner as well that's lapped over the edge of the framing. And I did not realize between that and probably just a little inaccuracy in framing, this guy needs a pretty good sized scribe to get this gap to sit tight. It's tight up here at the top. It's probably about 3/8 of an inch down at the bottom. So I gotta close that up as well.
After the first piece of fascia we put up, it was very clear that pre-drilling all the holes on the ground was the way to go.
Our apprentice in training decided he wanted to come up on the stairs to be with Mom while she did some plugging.
Plugging.
How's it going, Mom?
Good. We are deburring and then plugging. So here are some that I already did. You can see this board in particular is pretty dark, and a lot of our plugs are light, unfortunately. So some of them are a little bit more obvious.
They disappear pretty well on camera. I mean, I can barely, yeah, you can see a little bit of a light spot.
You can see this one, yeah. But there's gonna be a railing here anyways, so you won't notice. But what I did to help myself to find plugs easily is I sorted them by color. So the ones that are light are towards the middle of the board, and then I have intermediate and then darker. So I can just come over here and grab them real quick and not waste time trying to find ones that match.
That's attention to detail right there. The devil is in the details.
This is going above and beyond for sure. I can guarantee that most deck contractors are probably not doing this.
They grab the plug out of the bag, hammer it in, and move on to the next one.
I know, but this is our house.
They probably don't even line the grains up. You can't. The plugs actually have grains, and if you don't line them up, it is kind of obvious because you have this little circle with the grains going this way. So at the very minimum, we're making sure the grains are lined up, but Elena's taking the next step to really color match, because there is a little bit of a gradient. Like you can tell the middle of the board is lighter than the outsides. I'm not really sure if that's a manufacturing process thing or if they've intended that or what.
Yeah, it definitely is intended. It makes the board look a lot more realistic.
Right.
And you can see this is a little bit dirty, this board. We'll come back and wipe it down. I do it sometimes when it's on the ground, but...
I really like the grain pattern in this fascia too. It really does look like a legitimate board. Some of these grain patterns are this like very cheesy looking fake stamped wood grain, but this actually looks like it could easily be a stained piece of wood, which I appreciate that. I think Worcestershire did a good job there.
Yeah, they did a really good job with this color.
Throughout the process of this deck build, I've coined the term turtle deck construction, because that would be the name of our company if we were going to be deck builders for a living. We're going to call it the slowest, our motto is going to be the slowest deck you'll ever get, but the most quality too, the most attention to detail. We've probably been working on this deck on and off for like 6 weeks now, in the midst of, you know, going to weddings and doing YouTube video editing and other video editing. So it's not like it's been our full-time gig, but we're definitely not speed demons by any stretch of the imagination, especially with all the detail and the little fine tuning we like to do, the picture framing, the beveled edges. We'll take a lot of attention to detail on the stairs as well. So we just take our time, and at the end of the day, it does get done eventually. And
It's gonna look good too.
yeah, it gets done and it looks really good and performs like it's supposed to. Whereas I think if we sped through it a lot more, we would inevitably make a lot more mistakes. It wouldn't look nearly as good. And then we'd spend the rest of our life looking at it and wishing we would have taken
that's the
another
challenge.
couple days to do the thing right. So
Yeah.
that's what we do is we're Turtle Deck Construction. We do things the slow way, but the right way.
The very last piece of fascia for the main deck anyway.
With those last couple pieces, the fascia install is complete. The hardest part was honestly doing all of the pre-drilling. It was quite a bit of fasteners to put this in, but it's certainly not going anywhere. And I'm glad we did the miters as well at the corners. It was definitely more difficult to get those nice and tight, but I think it was worth it. I like the look of it. I think it's just a much more clean, seamless look, similar to how we did the picture framing. I don't think I'm gonna use the same tactic for mitering on the stair fascia, but we will cover that in a whole another video just on the stairs.
And as far as the decking color and texture goes, we absolutely love it. It is perfect for what we were looking for. We wanted something that looked pretty realistic, and we think that this fits what we were looking for. It's also going to complement the black railing extremely well. Also, it complements our siding and our black windows and doors. So super excited about it, and we're looking forward to being able to enjoy some nice fall evenings out here on the deck soon.
The next stage for this deck is railing, obviously. That's gonna be a video of its own. We're also using Moisture Shield's railing. It's a black textured aluminum railing, really beefy system, and it honestly looks like a pretty simple install. It's all surface mounted, so we've got blocking in place to lag screw and through bolt all of our railing bases too, and that will be covered in the next video.
Thank you so much for watching, and see you on the next one.
But